My fork scraped against an empty plate, not because I'd eaten much, just nerves. The turkey was dry, the stuffing colder than it should have been. But what really settled like stone in my gut was the silence. Lana didn't ask me about my week. David didn't mention the game we used to watch every year. My grandson sat 2 seats away, glued to a screen, earbuds in. "Dad," David said, stacking plates, "you're done here." I blinked. "What?" He didn't repeat it, just took my dish and walked off. Lana followed, grabbing the casserole. No eye contact, no second glance. I sat there a minute longer, listening to the clink of silverware being dumped into the sink. No one asked if I wanted dessert. That night I lay in the guest bed, if you could call it that. The mattress was stiff, the sheets thin, the walls unfamiliar. Once this room had held David's comic books and his favorite blanket. Now it was cold beige and curated throw pillows. The door was cracked. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but their voices carried. "We could turn that room into a meditation space," Lana said. David chuckled. "Yeah, finally clear the energy." "Think he'll even notice?" David answered. "He's lucky we even brought him this year." My hand clenched around the house key in my pocket. I kept it on me always. A habit, a tether. I built that house, poured the foundation in winter, took double shifts to afford every wall. My wife and I made love in every room, argued in the kitchen, held our newborn son on the porch swing. And now I'm a guest, an inconvenience. I got up the next morning before sunrise. Lana had left a note, "Help yourself to coffee." But the pot was empty. I didn't bother saying goodbye. On the drive back to my apartment, small, neat, paid in full, I couldn't stop replaying it. "You're done here." Done where exactly? In their lives, in my own story. At a red light, I reached over and opened the glove box. The deed to the house was inside. Not a copy. The original, my name, my signature, no one else. They didn't know. And if anyone's listening, don't make the mistake I did. Don't confuse presence for belonging. When I pulled into the lot, I didn't go inside right away. I just sat in the car, watching the wind sway the trees. Then I took the deed, walked up to my apartment, and laid it on the table like a loaded weapon. If I was done, then so was pretending. The drawer stuck for a moment, like even it hesitated to open. My fingers found the thin brass handle, pulled harder, and there it was, the manila envelope I hadn't touched in years, faded at the corners but still sealed with a thin red string. Inside the deed. My name, my wife's name. 42 years ago, we signed that paper at a wooden table in a stuffy lawyer's office with our baby in a stroller beside us. We were young, scared, but proud. Her signature slanted, a little shaky from the pen. Mine bold, confident. I traced her name with the side of my finger. Grief doesn't knock, it just walks in. I sat down at the desk, the document open in front of me like a ghost. They think it's theirs. David's told everyone at church. Lana mentioned a renovation plan on Facebook. My grandson posted a photo captioned, "Future Home Vibes." But the deed never left my hands. I picked up the phone and called Helen. She answered on the second ring. "Hey there, stranger." "Helen," I said, steadying my voice, "is it too late to sell the house?" She was quiet. Then, "Not unless you gave it away behind my back." "I didn't." "Then you still have every legal right. Do you want me to start the process?" "Yes," I said, quietly. She paused again. "You sure?" "I'm sure." I hung up and placed the deed gently back into the envelope, then into the drawer. All these years I thought I was holding on to the house for them. For birthdays, holidays, maybe for grandkids running barefoot down the hall. But none of that ever came. Instead, I got cold turkey, colder silence, and a son who cleared my plate like I was a burden. They don't know this house isn't a gift, it's a lesson. And I intend to teach it. The next morning, I sorted through the old photos tucked behind the drawer. My wife on the porch with a book in her lap, David on the roof with me, hammer in hand. A Christmas morning where the living room was more wrapping paper than floor. All of it real. And yet, none of them remembered. They think legacy is something they're entitled to. But legacy is earned. By love. By loyalty. By showing up when it counts. That afternoon, Helen sent over the listing agreement. I read every line, every number, every clause. Then I signed it. The pen felt heavy in my hand. When it was done, I looked around my small apartment, worn carpet, crooked blinds, water heater that groaned in the night. It didn't matter, because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't angry. I was focused. She showed up right on time. Marcy, young, neat blazer, firm handshake. Not the kind of agent I'd normally trust with a house full of history, but something about her eyes told me she didn't deal in nonsense. I opened the door and stepped aside. "Thanks for meeting me here," I said. She nodded. "It's an honor. You've taken good care of the place." She didn't ask why I was selling. Didn't mention downsizing or nursing homes or any of the usual assumptions people make when a man my age puts a family home on the market. She just walked the perimeter with quiet respect. "These wood beams original?" she asked, running her hand along the living room ceiling. "Every inch. I stained them myself." "They're beautiful. This place has character. I know buyers who'd kill for that." I half smiled. Let's hope they bring their wallets, not their knives. She laughed gently, then pulled out her phone. "Mind if I take a few shots for private previews? No public listings yet." "That's exactly what I want." She moved through the space like she understood it, not just the bones, but the memories still clinging to the walls. When she reached the hallway, I stayed back. My eyes fell on that strip of wall just past the light switch, still slightly uneven in color. David was 8 when we painted that hallway together. I bought him his own tiny roller. He dipped it too far, lost grip, and spilled half the can across the floor. He cried, thought he'd ruined everything. I knelt down, scooped him up, told him, "There's no such thing as perfect paint, just proof you tried." He hugged me so hard I nearly dropped the brush. I would have given him the world that day. Now he wouldn't give me a seat at my own table. "Do you want to keep the family photos up for the showings?" Marcy asked from the hallway. "No," I said, "take them down." "Understood." She didn't ask why, didn't pry. Just walked back to her bag, pulled out folders, contracts, timelines. "I'll handle everything," she said. "You'll get what it's worth, maybe more." "Thank you," I said. As we wrapped up, she stopped by the front door. "If you ever change your mind." "I won't." She nodded once, then left. The door clicked behind her. I stood alone again. I walked the hallway slowly, ran my hand along the same spot David did. The dried paint bump was still there. But the warmth was gone. This house raised a family. It deserved better memories than the ones trying to erase me. And maybe, if I let it go now, it could start again. Clean walls, fresh hands. No whispers of "you're done here" behind closed doors. I parked a block away, not out of fear, just a need for silence. Their driveway was empty. David and Lana were both at work. I knew their routines like the back of my hand. I still remembered when they used to call just to tell me they'd be late. That stopped years ago. I didn't use the front door. I crept around the side yard, past the same hedge I once trimmed every Saturday. The gate still stuck a little. I nudged it open with my shoulder and stepped onto the old stone path. That side door, paint peeling, handle loose, the one I used during thunderstorms when I'd come in soaked and laughing. I still remembered the way it stuck before giving way with a groan. The house smelled the same, lemon cleaner, cheap candles, but the air felt heavier, like it had learned to hold its breath. I didn't turn on the lights. I walked slowly, letting my eyes adjust. My cane tapped against the wood floors I refinished by hand after my wife passed. She would have hated how dusty the corners had gotten. In the living room, I paused. The shelf where Lana displayed her imported vases used to hold my wife's quilting photos. Now, cold porcelain stared back at me, artifacts of taste, not memory. I lifted my phone, click one photo. Not for evidence, for farewell. Room to room, I moved like a ghost in my own story. In the kitchen, I stood by the counter where David used to do his homework while I made spaghetti. He was left-handed, always smudging his own writing. I gently turned the paper for him, say, "There's no shame in how you're built, son." Now he scrolls past me at Thanksgiving like I'm background noise. I took another photo, the sink, the chipped tile, the way the sun still hit that spot just right mid-morning. Down the hallway, I opened the cabinet near the laundry room, mostly forgotten space. My hand brushed against something. A folded sheet of paper, yellowed at the edges. I pulled it out. A drawing, crayon on construction paper. A house, a stick figure with a crooked smile. Me plus grandpa plus pancakes. My grandson must have drawn it years ago. It had been stuffed behind the cabinet. Forgotten. I stared at it. Not out of anger, but ache. I folded it carefully and slid it into my coat pocket. There had been love here once, real love. I wasn't imagining it. But it was gone now. I walked back through the house without touching anything else. At the front door, I paused. I let the silence settle. Then I locked it, lights off. No trace I'd been there. I stepped off the porch and didn't look back. Some goodbyes don't need an audience. I sat at the tiny table in my apartment, a cup of lukewarm tea in my hands, when Helen called. "It's done," she said. I didn't speak right away, just stared at the steam rising from the cup, curling like breath from something waking up. The couple signed, full price. No contingencies, she continued. Escrow opens next week. They're moving fast. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. Twins, right? Expecting in spring, they wanted a yard, a quiet street, something with heart. Funny, I said. I built that yard, dug every fence post myself. You did good, Helen said gently. Now you get to choose what comes next. After we hung up, I set the phone down and let myself exhale. Not a sigh, not relief, just breath. It had been caught in my chest for too long, trapped behind years of silent dinners and unreturned affection. Now it flowed, slow and steady. The walls of this apartment aren't much plaster, old carpet, a heater that clicks like it's clearing its throat. But it's mine. No one rolls their eyes when I speak here. No one talks over me. A buzz from my phone. David, will you be coming for Christmas? No hi, Dad. No how are you feeling? Just logistics, as if I were luggage to be scheduled. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. Then typed, "We'll see." I put the phone face down. I wondered what Christmas would look like without that house. Without the fireplace I rebuilt after the chimney cracked in '89. Without the mantel where my wife hung stockings, one for each grandchild each year. They'd stand in that living room in a few weeks, all smiles and wine glasses, talking about the good old times. Not realizing the good old times were walking away from them, papers signed, boxes packed, walls already promised to someone new. A family who saw a home, not a placeholder for inheritance. They thought they had years. They thought I'd fade politely into memory. But the man they ignored at the end of the Thanksgiving table, the one they handed cold turkey and colder words. He didn't disappear. He took action. Not with shouting, not with slamming doors. With signatures. With silence. With the kind of quiet that rearranges futures. I stood up, opened the window a crack. The air outside was sharp, winter pressing against the frame. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked and someone laughed. Life still moving. I looked around the room, my chair, my books, the photo of my wife in a wooden frame by the lamp. This wasn't defeat. It was the first breath of something new. The call came mid-morning. David's voice was tight. "We want to talk, face to face." I let the pause hang long enough for him to wonder if I'd say no. Then I said, "All right." We met at a quiet cafe off Main Street. Neutral ground, public enough that no one could raise their voice without drawing attention. Lana arrived first, her hair done like she was going to a charity brunch. She smiled like nothing had happened. "You look good," she said. "Really, we've been thinking about fixing up the backyard, finally tearing down that old shed, maybe adding a pergola." I nodded slowly, stirring my coffee. The spoon clinked against the ceramic in slow circles. David cleared his throat. "We didn't want to say anything at Thanksgiving, but we've got plans for the place. Once the weather warms up, we're going to make it shine." I looked between them. Their faces were so full of certainty, of assumption, as if the world still belonged to them. "You'll have to ask the new owners about that," I said. Lana blinked. "What?" David leaned forward. "What do you mean?" I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out the manila envelope and slid it across the table. My fingers didn't shake. "Escrow closed Friday," I said. "It's done." Lana's hand hovered above the envelope like it might burn her. "You're joking," David said. I didn't answer. He grabbed the envelope, ripped it open, scanned the first page. His face changed, like a man realizing the bridge he just burned led to the only place he called home. You sold it," he whispered, "without telling us." "You told me I was done," I said calmly. I agreed. Lana's voice pitched up. "That's our house. David told everyone it was." "It never was," I cut in. "Not legally, not morally, and definitely not anymore." David slammed the envelope on the table. "You had no right." "I had every right," I said, standing. "I built it, paid for it, maintained it. You just lived in it." Lana's eyes filled with something between fury and disbelief. "Where are we supposed to go?" "That sounds like a conversation for you too," I said, buttoning my coat. "Maybe start with your realtor." They started to speak again, overlapping voices, panic rising. But I was already walking toward the door. I didn't need to hear the rest. I'd already heard enough to last a lifetime. Outside, the wind carried the scent of roasted beans and cold earth. I took a deep breath, felt it fill me, sharp, clean. I walked away without looking back. Let them sit with the silence. I had finally learned how to live in mine. The photo came through just as I poured my cider. A group text from David. The image took a moment to load. When it did, I just stared. There they were, David, Lana, and my grandson, standing outside the house like orphans in front of a locked gate. But it wasn't ours anymore. There was a new wreath on the door. A fresh pine circle with gold ribbon neatly hung. A welcome mat I didn't recognize. And just to the right of the porch, the final punctuation. A red and white sold sign staked into the frozen ground. The caption under the photo read, "What the hell, Dad?" I let the screen dim. No reply. I picked up my cup, warm between my palms, and leaned back in the chair I bought second-hand when I moved into this apartment. It creaked softly under me, familiar and unassuming. No tension, no performance. The small artificial tree in the corner had no presence beneath it, no lights blinking, just a single ornament, the last one my wife had made before she passed. A blue glass angel. It caught the soft lamplight just enough to shine. I closed my eyes. No screaming. No fake gratitude. No tension that crackled through the air like static. No muttered insults behind my back or glances. exchanged across the dinner table while I sat in silence. Just this, warm cider, quiet space, and the distant hum of wind against the window pane. I thought about the Christmases that used to fill that house. The smell of my wife's cinnamon bread, David running down the hallway in flannel pajamas, even Lana, before she hardened, humming carols while wrapping gifts. I thought about the years I told myself things would get better, that love would return if I just waited, that respect could be earned back by swallowing enough silence. But that night, sitting in a modest apartment without garland or grandeur, I realized something else. The holidays weren't ruined. They were reclaimed. Because for the first time in years, I didn't feel like an unwanted guest in my own story. I didn't have to brace myself for cold glances, biting remarks, or the sound of my own chair scraping across the floor as I cleared my half-eaten plate alone. They stood outside a house thinking they lost shelter. But I'd already found mine, not in bricks or inheritance, but in the one thing they'd never valued: peace. The phone buzzed again, another text from David, this time no words, just a question mark. I silenced the notifications, set the phone face down. Let them wonder. Let them freeze outside a memory they thought would wait for them forever. I raised my cup to the window. Cheers, I whispered. And let the night be still. The voicemail came in just after sunrise. I was trimming the ends off a loaf of bread, thinking maybe I'd toast it with some butter and honey. Quiet morning. No news on. Just the heater ticking in the wall and the sun pushing through the blinds like it had nowhere urgent to be. My phone buzzed once, then again. Voicemail. I let it sit for a while before I pressed play. Lana's voice poured through like syrup, thick, heavy, dramatic. You blindsided us, she said, already trembling. This was our family's home. You didn't even give us a chance to talk, to work it out. I could almost see her, standing in whatever overpriced kitchen she was used to now, mascara maybe running for effect, maybe not. Her breath hitched. We were counting on it for the kids, for the holidays, for everything. She sniffled, then went quiet for a beat. You said you loved us. And then the message ended. I sat with it. My thumb hovered over delete. But something in me paused. Instead, I saved it, dropped it into the digital folder Helen and I had titled Records. Not for revenge, not for courtroom drama, just memory, proof that when people lose control, they remember how to beg. A minute later, another notification came through. This time, just a text from David. Hope you're happy. No punctuation, no greeting, no name. Just a small sentence loaded with spite. I set the phone down and stared at the slice of bread on my plate, toasted now, slightly overdone. I smiled, not a wide grin, just a quiet one, a release. It wasn't happiness that filled me, not the kind they assumed, not joy from their grief. I wasn't celebrating their discomfort. I wasn't dancing in their confusion. I was just still calm. Because I finally stopped allowing mine. For years, I swallowed my hurt in silence, let myself be cut out of decisions, out of conversations, treated like an aging footnote in their lives, tolerated only for tradition's sake or inheritance. They thought I'd die quietly. They thought I'd pass the torch and fade like smoke. But I hadn't. I'd lit my own fire. And now they stood outside of it, watching it warm someone else's home. I stood, carried the plate to the sink, and rinsed it under cold water. The morning sun spilled across the counter, golden and indifferent. The phone buzzed again. I didn't check it. Didn't need to. The record had already been written. And this time, I was the one holding the pen. I sat at Helen's desk, the will spread before me like a confession. Her pen tapped softly against the table as she waited for my final decisions. It felt like signing a eulogy, not mine, but theirs. the version of them I used to believe in. I want the profits split 3 ways, I said, steady. A third to the neighborhood food bank, a third to the senior housing fund, the rest to the library under Marion's name. Helen looked up. Your wife would have liked that. She used to volunteer there, I nodded. Said books were the only place that ever made her feel fully understood. Helen wrote it down. Her movements were sharp, efficient, but her eyes lingered on me, soft. And your son? I picked up the paper and pen, wrote the words myself, 7 of them. Entitlement is not the same as inheritance. I slid the sheet back to her. She didn't flinch, just read it aloud once and nodded. And Lana? Nothing, I said, not even a breath. Helen raised an eyebrow. They'll try to challenge it, especially her. I leaned back in the chair, hands folded. Let them, I said. They can spend years trying to reverse a decision that was only necessary because of the years they spent pretending I didn't exist. Helen finished typing and turned the screen toward me. Review it all. Make sure there's no room for ambiguity. I did. Every clause was a blade sharpened with memory, every sentence wrapped in paper-thin dignity. No loopholes, no leverage. I initialed each page, signed the final line. The last time I'd signed anything this important, it was the deed to the house. 42 years ago, Marion and I had held hands after, laughed at how small our signatures looked compared to how large the dream had been. That dream was long gone. But I'd built a new one. Not for family. For strangers. People who needed warmth, meals, words on pages. People who'd never once whispered, "You're done here," over a cold plate of turkey. I stood, my knees aching just slightly, and shook Helen's hand. As I walked out of her office and into the wind, the air felt less like winter and more like closure. The legacy they thought they were owed. It had already begun feeding lives they'll never meet. And that was the justice they never saw coming. I set the recorder on the table. No video, no theatrics, just the small red light blinking against the quiet. My voice sounded strange at first, rough from disuse, but it steadied with each word. If you're hearing this, I said, then you already know what you lost. A pause. The silence between sentences felt heavier than the words themselves. It wasn't just the money, it was me. The man who built your roof, fixed your leaks, forgave every insult you didn't think I heard. I took a slow breath. You made inheritance sound like a finish line when all it ever was meant to be was a thank you. But gratitude doesn't grow where greed lives, so I gave what was left of me to strangers who might still know how to care. The light blinked. The words lingered in the air, low and final. I hope one day you find peace, not because I forgive you, but because I refuse to carry you anymore. I clicked stop. The room swallowed the sound. I transferred the recording onto a small black USB stick and labeled it in block letters, Legacy. No fancy title, no hidden meaning, just truth preserved in plastic. It went into the safe deposit box beside the will, the food bank, the housing fund, the library under Marion's name. She would have liked that. She always said stories deserved new homes, even when people didn't. I sat down in my chair, the one by the window that creaked like an old friend shifting its weight. The radiator hummed. Outside, snow drifted in slow circles. The quiet that once scared me now wrapped around me like an old blanket. My wife's photo sat on the mantel, still framed in the wood she painted decades ago. I whispered to her, "It's done. They can't hurt me anymore." The words didn't echo. They settled deep and calm. I reached for my tea, took a sip, and felt the warmth slide down my throat. The clock ticked on, steady and unbothered. For the first time in years, I didn't need to be heard to feel understood. Some stories end with a bang. Mine ends here, with my voice quiet but still alive. Finally uninterrupted.